Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Colleagues, thank you for being present. To the people of Roxborough, Argyle, Dalaford, Louisville, Betsiope, etc., I'm very thankful for your vote of confidence. It's now 8 years since, 8 it is? Well, yeah, I think it is. Since representing the people of that area. And I must say special congratulations to our champion, Verse. He gave them some good verse last night, and he's from Roxborough. So I'm very proud of the book. Well done. And I wish to respond to my colleague, the member from Wim it is, so many different names, Wim, Spring, Darrell Spring, etc. I wish to respond to him by saying that the idea of us as Tobago recognizing the Constitutional Amendment Bill is a good idea. But just what it is, what this Constitutional Amendment Bill is, what it is that Tobago desire, I will try in the next few moments to make it absolutely clear to all and sundry what Tobagonians desire and what the bill provides. Allow me to make an apology for my colleague, the Assemblyman from Speyside, Castara. He's not here today. He would have chose to participate in a brainstorming session for educational practitioners somewhere in the back hill of Sao Paulo, while he allows people to deal with the challenges. I would to God he was here, Madam Presiding Officer, because in 2023 he would have committed to represent autonomy issue. And I believe if he was here, he would not have sanctioned some of the child's play that is what took place here within this August House. But nevertheless, he's not here, and so I have a responsibility to call the House to order at this point in time. House is in session. Madam Presiding Officer, what Tobago desire is not autonomy, but self-determination. Let that soak in for a while. Tobago does not desire autonomy. Tobago desires self-determination. Autonomy speaks of a measure of rights. We want a measure of rights. Tobago does not want a measure of rights. Tobago wants all, A-L-L, all its rights. If I'm to say to you this, as Tobagonians, we understand through past medium knowledge where we came from. We came from a place in the 1700s, 1769, when Tobago operated under the old representative system. It was a system of governance where there was a lower house and an upper house. What my colleagues are introducing today is nothing new. Donkey years, it was there before. Tobagonians don't want that. We had it already. So Tobago enjoyed in the 1700s a bicameral system, a lower house and an upper house. Tobago enjoyed in the 1700s an electoral system, or system by which representatives were elected. Yes, there were about 15 representatives then, and they represented Tobago on all aspects. If you want to understand what autonomy was or what self-determination was, it was what Tobago had back then. You see, back then in the 1700s, right up to 1876, those that occupied the Legislative Assembly, they had what we now call the right to impose taxes, levies, create laws. Tobago enjoyed its own constitution. Yeah, Tobago had its own general hospital, its own surgeon. Tobago had its own commissioner of police. Do not call that name. Tobago had its own chief justice, and there are many buried on the island here. Now what we have today is the result of a vendetta that someone in the past had against Tobago. In 1876, when the Belmano riot took place, Tobago was actually under the control of the working class. And the executive that governed Tobago at that time in the House of Assembly were unable to restore law and order. And for that reason, and that reason alone, Queen Victoria went 3 months thereafter and repealed the executive powers of the Tobago House of Assembly. Let me break it down just a bit for educational purposes. On the 1st of May, 1876, a riot took place in the village of Roxborough. That's right, where we came from, you know. We don't take nonsense, we fight back. And what happened after that, 3 months later, the Queen of England repealed the executive powers of the Assembly in the Tobago Tobago Constitution, thereby creating a Crown colony rule. The riot took place in May, and the executive powers was repealed in August of that same year. From that moment to now, Madam Presiding Officer, Tobago has been grappling with England, the colonial powers, Trinidad, to get back to where it was as a country with self-determination. But even though, and let me just back. After that, the next wicked piece of legislature that affected Tobagonians drastically was in 1887. Mark those numbers down as good students. It will help you with your history lessons. In 1887, the Queen then moved to the Parliament of England. And she said, let's join the British colony of Tobago with the colony of Trinidad. And thereby, for the first time, we have what is called Trinidad and Tobago. It is that piece of legislation that governs the relationship Trinidad and Tobago. However, there was a caveat. And she said, look, to the House, allow me some little room here. I will determine at a later date the terms and conditions by which this Trinidad relationship will go by. She said that. And so therefore, in 1898, plenty numbers, mark it down, and all right. 1898, around November, the Queen moved to create the terms by which Tobago and Trinidad operated by. You see, in 1887, they moved the treasury, they moved a certain thing, and it was Trinidad and Tobago, one country. But in 1898, that year, something different happened. Tobago was made a ward of Trinidad and Tobago. Tobago is not a ward of Trinidad, mind you. Tobago is a ward of Trinidad and Tobago. You see, there's no such a place called Trinidad anymore. From the time they created Trinidad and Tobago Act, there was no place called Trinidad after that. Legally, you can search high, you can search low, there's no place called Trinidad. There's a place called Trinidad and Tobago, and that is represented by the island of Trinidad. However, Tobago has been defined in that council, order of council document that says Tobago become a ward of Trinidad and Tobago. If we have to deal with self-determination, we must go back and understand our position. So when they came in this document and they said we are going to just repeal the status of ward of Tobago, it is not what Tobago wants. Tobago wants a nullification and a rewriting of the Trinidad and Tobago Act. That old act, that called Trinidad and Tobago Act, that was done by the British colonial masters, that must be repealed and replaced. That's what we want. That's what Tobago wants. And it must be done so that there could be a level of fairness. Fairness between the island of Tobago and the island of Trinidad. Somewhere in this document, when the committee was looking through it, in the preamble, the state preamble is under section 4 of the Constitution. If anyone understands what a preamble is, it is a story before the story. All right? So before you get to the real story, that is the story. But that story has no real weight. It is simply there to help you to understand the story when you get to it. So in the preamble, they say that Tobago should be given the right to self-determination. That Tobago should, among its own people, determine, among its own people, its political status, yeah, and its own economic, social, and cultural development. This is what the United Nations call the right to self-determination, a cardinal principle rooted in international law. It's not a friendly gesture. Tobago, unlike the other Caribbean nations, never had the opportunity to exercise its own self-determination. According to the law, any single island that was held under subjugation by a colonial power must have the right, after 1962, around there, to determine for itself its own political status. When we say political status, Tobago has the right among itself to determine whether we want to be in a relationship with Trinidad at all. That is our right. We must determine that. And the Constitution acknowledges that in section 4 of the preamble. We must determine among ourselves whether we want to form an association with the Eastern Caribbean countries, or whether we want to just be fully independent. Tobago must decide that. And so far, Madam Presiding Officer, Tobago has not yet decided that. But what we have in this document here is a position that Trinidad is telling us, come and sign this. Put it to a print here, I'll give you a little more money. Even when we look at the money, what money is that? They're offering us 6.9% when the dispute resolution, somewhere around 2000, around 2001, would have offered us some 6.9%. They are offering 6.8 in 2024. It is not what Tobago wants. Madam Presiding Officer, they said they're going to give us lawmaking powers. What lawmaking powers inside of this? There is no lawmaking powers for Tobago. They say we could form the Tobago Act. In the current Tobago House of Assembly Act, there is something called assembly laws, which we could already make. But we are not making assembly laws. No one has ever, except the former Chief Secretary, Mr. Overlondon. He attempted to. But even his own government dismissed him as being unrealistic when he presented the Tobago Police Bill. Imagine that. And now they are saying to you, you can make Tobago laws, call it Tobago Act. And these laws will have weight as long as it does not conflict with the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. But as I already established, there is no place called Trinidad. Trinidad is now Trinidad and Tobago is now by itself as a ward of Trinidad. Madam Presiding Officer, may I make it more clear to you? Tobago is an oxymoron. Tobago cannot be a ward of itself. Yeah? Tobago can best be described as the little finger of the little finger. Anybody knows that at all? Madam Presiding Officer, have you ever seen the little finger has a little finger? It's a kind of weird thing, right? Abnormality. So what we have in the Trinidad and Tobago relationship is called an abnormality, where Tobago is a ward of itself. And they are saying that they will just repeal that part of it. No. As long as we cannot make laws without those laws being vetted by Trinidad, we are still a ward. We cannot borrow money internationally. We must go to Trinidad, and they must give us permission to borrow money internationally. Our executive cannot even govern, even the state you can govern here. Because what you are governing can only be in respect to Trinidad. So Trinidad sets the bar, and tell him, come and accept this. Tobago does not want that. What Tobago wants is a resetting of the match. We want to have the Trinidad and Tobago Act of 1887 fully repealed and replaced. It must be replaced with what is fair, what is decent, and what is just. There must be no Trinidad and Tobago, and then Tobago being a little part of the little finger. No. Tobago must be Tobago, and Trinidad must be Trinidad. And no, it must not be the colonial powers that bring us together, but we must come together based on a meeting of minds, based on a bringing of our assets, our natural resources, and say, let's partner together to build a better country. That's what we want. We're not preaching separatism. We're not preaching next we'll call it secession. We are preaching togetherness, but it must be done the right way. So I reject the idea of just passing this bill, and it's a good bill. This bill undermines what our foreparents was fighting for. This bill is a slap in the face. They didn't fight and die for Tobago that will hitch up under Trinidad arm as if we are roll on. We don't want that. We want to be Tobago, and Tobago must be defined as Tobago, and Trinidad must be defined as Trinidad. The only way to do that is to repeal that colonial act, not even the Constitution. Repeal that, and the island of Tobago and the island of Trinidad must now be defined. You see, when they made Tobago a ward of Trinidad, it was simply an amendment to the Trinidad and Tobago Act. All right? And we need to understand that. It was simply an amendment. And so once they repeal the act, they repeal all of that, and they could fix all of that then. That is what is destroying us. Even in this document, they are treating us as a ward. Why can't we have financial freedom as Grenada, Barbados, St. Vincent? Why can't we have legislative freedom as Barbados, Grenada, St. Vincent? Why is it that the Chief Justice must determine what is good law and order in Tobago? No, shouldn't happen at all. Why Trinidad must look over our shoulders? We do not want that, Madam Presiding Officer. I do not want to go much further. I think I've explained to Tobago what we want and what they are presenting. But let me say this today. I look at my colleagues on the other side, and a lot is lacking. You cannot amend a motion without clarity. Just amend it for amending's sake. I sat and I tried to ask myself, what Tobago is benefiting from this discussion? And we're hearing all types of outer timing talk. And it's not focused on the bill. People going to tongue, they're straying away. Yeah? Because that's what they do, distract. Listen to me, Madam Presiding Officer, we have had a political revolution in December 2021. The minds of the people have changed. Their appetite have changed. They do not have an appetite for foolishness again. Tobagonians do not have the appetite for that. Tobagonians want to hear, what are you doing about the thing you promised? So when my good friend gone off and he's participating in some brainstorming course for teaching practitioners and leaving Tobago to waddle, they are marking that down. Now is a serious time. Every single Tobagonian must understand we want to have a reset. Leave the constitutional amendments for now. Let us go back and let us repeal that 1887 Trinidad and Tobago Act and all the amendments subsequent to that, and let's create now Trinidad and Tobago, Tobago and Trinidad. Do you know, in the early 1900s, when you see a dollar, at the back of the dollar, there was a symbol for Tobago and a symbol for Trinidad. Yeah? They replaced all of that, and they say the symbol for Tobago now is the cocky crow, a pest. A pest. And in more than one ways, they treat us as a pest. They say, oh gosh, they're doing not only come in and ask, we don't want. This is how they have relegated us to. Instead of trying to address those issues, they want to address three ships. Again, we have no say in that, because the votes are stacked against us. It's 39 votes to 2. And in the cases where these votes have aligned themselves with people in Trinidad, it's really all 41 seats in Trinidad. Because there's no independent vote in Tobago that says, look, this is what Tobago wants, and we are not supporting that. I beg, Madam Presiding Officer, this August House will look beyond this amendment and let's get to the root cause. We are only discussing the symptoms here. We need to address the root cause, which is the fundamental thing that caused Trinidad and Tobago to join. Repeal that bill, and let's replace it with a good bill. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Assemblyman Sampson. You may now join this debate.